So today we're going to be working from a drawing of a zebra. So you need to, in a 2B pencil or an HB if you prefer, um, draw a picture of a zebra. And what I've noticed when I was drawing it is that the black stripes go into the actual hair. So you need to make sure those channels of stripes that you've put on the body then lead into the bristle or mane or whatever it's called on the back here and above here as well. So the image I'm working from, which I found on the internet, is this one. And you can see from this image that there's quite a bit of yellow they've put in. I'm not entirely sure why. I think I'm going to go for more of a yellow ochre on mine. I can see a bit of yellow and lilac and pink in there. I'm going to have a bit of fun with the underpainting. And then I'm going to go in with some black, but not fully black. I'm going to put colours into those stripes like they have, because I think that's quite interesting. But as for the white skin, I'm not sure I'm going to go that yellow. I think it's not quite working. Anyway, so let's get back to the drawing. So here's the drawing. I've got my paints, I've got my water, I've got a size 10 brush, I've got a size 4 brush for detail. And what I'm going to do is I've also got myself a sponge, which is just a dishwashing sponge that I've taken the back off on. So you could always use, you could also use watercolor special sponges, or you could use cotton wool. It's up to you. So I'm going to tear this sponge in half so it's a little bit more manageable. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to dab some undercoat on. So instead of that yellow undercoat on the white hide of the zebra, I'm going to put on some yellow ochre. So I've mixed myself up some yellow ochre. You can see how dirty my watercolor set is. I don't mind because I can use these colors again for things. That's why I leave them there. Anyway, I've got my yellow ochre. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just gently dab the yellow ochre quite randomly onto some of the zebra. I'm going over the stripes as well because it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to go back over and water them down a bit so that we've got a sort of general, sort of slightly dappled undercoat of colour in that white. And then you can just use a bit of clean water on the sponge to lift some of it off so it's not quite so strong. Just so that we've got not just pure white. So now I'm just blending it in a little bit. So that it takes the edge off. Now, one of the things I haven't done, which you could do if you don't want this stronger pencil, is to rub back some of the pencil before you start painting. But I quite like the pencil coming through on this occasion. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some colour to the black stripes. So I'm going to use a little bit of purple, violet actually. And I'm going to go into some of these stripes and add in some colour just so that I'm picking them quite randomly, just so that everything isn't pure black. I just want to get a bit of variety in there so that I'm not just going to have black stripes. So it sounds a bit odd because the stripes on a zebra are black, but it's quite nice to mix some of the colours, other colours into it. Don't worry if you sort of go slightly out of the lines, that's fine. And it will bloom a bit because we've just had some painting underneath, but that's fine as well. Now I'm going to go in with a bit of orange. There's some orange in places. And what this does is it just breaks up the blacks because you don't want it to be too just black on white. Why? Because this gives you a little bit more depth. You just want a little bit more depth. I'm going into the mane as well, just a little bit. And I'm going to go into a bit of the ears with that orange there. And then a little bit into the black that's on the nozzle or snout. I'm not quite sure what the terminology is for. It's the nose of a zebra. Not sure actually. And now I'm going to go in with a bit of yellow. Cadmium yellow is the one I'm going to do. Now, of course, you could just do black on white if you wanted, but I quite like the fact that it's not pure white paper there. Just gives it a little bit more dynamism, really, something a little bit more dynamic than just being black on white paper. So I'm quite, well, I'm very randomly choosing where to put the yellow. A little bit in here as well, as I said before, into the smelt. And some into the main. That. Just varying it up a bit, like that. Okay. And then once I've done that, I'm actually going to flick clean water. So just using your brush, just flick splatters of water onto your zebra that you just painted. Why? Because it will disperse the colour, give a bit of texture, and you can move the paint around a little bit so it becomes a little bit more, give it a shake, get a bit more interesting. You can tap it, bang it like that, bang it like that. And you can see the colours are starting to shift a little bit. Okay, and on top of that, I'm going to add those same colours back in and allow it to shift a little bit with this new splattering of water. Go back in with the orange. And that going, and you can see obviously because of the water, it's blooming a little bit, which is exactly what we want. So what I'm doing is I'm changing this painting to be different to the painting I'm working from because I want to keep my interest in it. And for me, I find this more interesting. So I'm giving it a bit of a tap and now I'm going in for that purple, lovely violet I've got. That. With painting, it's really important to make sure that you are enjoying what you're doing and allow yourself to experiment a bit. I mean, it's okay to faithfully copy something. Of course, it is if you want to. And I think it's also interesting to experiment and to get creative, your creativity flowing a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to give that a little tap, give it a little tap, like that, and another tap, and another tap. So what's happened is we've got some interesting movement on that. If you want some things to shift a little bit more, like I do in here, you can put a little bit more water in and give it a bit of a tap, like that. And then once you've done that, you're going to think about the background. So I could just do a sort of, generic safari color background, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this splattering technique. I'm going to put some water into the background. You can either tap your brush and splatter it on, or you can just drip it on like this. And then I'm going to use those same colours that I've used, which are the violet, and the orange, like that, just little tiny dabs. And then I'm going to use a little bit more yellow than the other colours because I think the yellow gives it a sort of sunshiny, nice feel. And then I'm just going to use the technique of tipping the paper and allowing it to spread around a bit. And then if you want to, you can also give it a bit of a tap as well. And then once you've done that, you're going to let it dry completely. And then once you've done that, you might want to lift certain areas up to make them a bit less intense. So you can use your sponge and lift some areas up. And by doing that, you're sort of using it to print as well. You're printing some of the colour you've just lifted up and moving it somewhere else. So it's quite a nice effect. And then just leave that to dry. And it will, of course, dry a little bit lighter. So when it's dry, you are ready to put in the black stripes. And when I say black, I don't mean fully black. I mean 50-50 of ultramarine blue and black together. So you get a sort of bluey black, which is much nicer to work with. Now, we're not going to do too strong a layer. So it's a little bit thinner than you might normally expect because we want some of this other colour to come through. What we're going to do is we're going to paint over these stripes, but we're going to make it not as dark as that, but a little bit more transparent. And then that means that the glazing effect will work. So we'll get some areas which have got the red underneath. You can see that happening already, and some with the purple. So it's a little bit of a thinner wash, thinner mix than you would normally use. I'm just going very lightly into these stripes. I don't want it to look too perfect, but you can see the orange coming through the black, the bluey black there, and the purple coming through. And if it's not strong enough, we can always add another layer when it's dry. So we're going to continue adding in all of those until you've completed the body, and then we'll get to the mane and the ears afterwards. You get a nice effect. It's lovely when you see the other colours coming through the glaze of bluey black. Don't press too hard because you want it to be nice and gentle. You don't want to drag the colour underneath. By the way, I'm using a 4 brush on this. You can see all the colours coming through, so that's really nice. And it sort of adds a little bit of extra depth. Makes the painting a little bit more interesting, I think. I'm pulling up into the mane, but you don't have to. We can leave the mane till later, the other little stripes, but you can drag the bluey black through to the mane if you want, and then we'll add the little spikes in afterwards. Okay, but don't worry about the ears. Like that, go around here. Now on the painting that I found, the nozzle, the snout, wasn't very clear in its drawing. So I'm sort of not really sure how it works around here, but I'm going to do a sort of generic snout effect. And I think the way I'll do that is to have a little bit of texture in there. When I say texture, I mean I'll break it up a little bit so there's a bit of something going on here. So it gives it a little bit of abstraction. Okay, so we're just going to go around the whole zebra like that with that bluey black. Make sure it's 50-50. Got a fly that's just come on my, oops, bye fly. Now the only drawback with mixing blacks with other colours is sometimes, especially blues, you can get a bit of granulation happening. And what that is when it gets a bit gritty. And I think usually it's the combination of blue and black together. So hopefully it won't be too bad. Let's see. Anyway, so I'm just filling them all in. Quite an enjoyable process. And then leave the eye for now. So carry on filling in those stripes. Let it dry before you add in anything else. Now, if you notice that stripe down the centre is actually a little bit darker than the rest. I'm using a clean, damp brush just to lift off some of that extra colour I put on, so it's not quite so strong. So a clean, damp brush to lift off some of that bluey black so that we've got the underneath colours coming through like on the rest of it. That was a bit heavy-handed on that bit. Okay, so just carry on doing that. You can drag the bluey black into the main, and then we'll deal with the ears and the eyes and a little bit on the snout. What's interesting is it actually dries a lot lighter than you think. So you can see a lot of the undercolour coming through. So I might go back over and put some extra bluey black in just on some of the parts so that we get a bit more of the zebra hide feel. I'm going to go back in, now it's drying off. 50% blue, 50% black. I'm going to go back in, and this is called glazing, when you add one layer of colour over another layer of colour that's dry. So wherever I feel it might need a little bit of a darker, like here, add some more in. Into there. Bring that round. Like that. Because remember, watercolour always dries lighter. And so you never get quite exactly what you think you're going to get. So you can go a bit more dramatic than you think on colours because they will dry lighter. It's hard to say how much lighter because it depends on the pigment and the condition of the temperature, sort of where you are, if you're in a hot country or not. And you can also use your brush to get a little bit more definition and sharpness around some of the edges if you want. Okay. Now, horse experts will probably know exactly how this snout should go, but I don't. I'm just a mere dog and cat lover, so I don't know about these things, but I'm enjoying doing it, even if I may be doing it wrong on the snout. Of course, if you want to do it expertly, maybe choose a different picture that's a little bit more defined than the one I chose. And remember, when you're putting the next layer of colour on, don't drag the colour. Just allow it to be sitting on top. Because if you drag the colour, you're just going to turn it into a sort of muddy brown because all the colours combined will make a sort of brown colour. So once again, go back over, find where you want some darker bits. I think in the main, it should be a little bit darker too. And then once you've done that, let it dry and we'll come back to doing the loose bits of mane at the front of the head, the ears, the eye, and some extra parts around in the background. Okay, right, once that's dry, we're going to come back to doing the ears. And if you notice on the picture that I'm sharing, the ears have got a sort of a bit of depth to them. You can see there's a sort of almost the hole shape, which is more like a slit going through the top of the ears. I'll just indicate that with, I don't change the colour on my pen. So if I do it in red, you can see this area here is like a slit shape. And then what else have we got? And then we've got this stray shapes coming in like that for the mane. And then we want to put in some of the bristly part of the mane. And we also want to add in the, which I'm going to actually do with a bit of acrylic white afterwards, of those eyelashes on the eye that we can see the full eyelashes. I'm going to use that. And then I may add in some little bits of white afterwards, which of course, generally speaking, we don't use for watercolor, but sometimes when you're doing something white, you need a bit of extra help. So let's go back to our picture. So we're going to go for the outside of the ears first. I'm going to put that outer ear in like that. Around the top, like that, and around here, like that. Like that, just to get us started. And then we're going to do that bristly effect, which looks to me like it's one side like that, and then one side like that. Same over here, one side like that, and one side like that. And you can see where the colour is underneath here that's actually helped give depth to that slit in the ear, that reddish colour that was just from moving the paper around has actually helped with that slit effect. Now we're going to tackle the mane, which has got these sort of tear away wilder bits at the front, which coming up, one's coming out like that one's coming out like that. And then there's some stalky bits up here, which are a bit like reeds. I'm just using my number 4 brush. And what you want to do is vary the thicknesses of those. Like that. So some are, and make some a bit darker than this. So you can use some little slightly darker bits, and that will give you depth as well. Okay, that's getting a bit better. Then we want to go to the eye. What I've noticed about the eye is that there's a sort of almost like an outline, like kohl eyeliner around the edge of it, like that, all the way around, making it a nice shape. Then we've got the eye itself. Now we're going to do a bit of cheating on this. I'm going to cheat a bit because we're going to use some white paint anyway. I'm going to fill in all of that space like that and bring that down. There's not much. I'm going to put the lashes in, which we will add white to afterwards. So there's lashes like that. And then we'll add in some white to that afterwards. And then this side, you can just about see the eyeball. And then some lashes, which we will add in afterwards. And then we're going to go back to the mane on the back. What we want to do is, again, using just the very pointy bit at the top of the top of the number 4 brush, just bring that through and add in some. And we're going to put white in here as well later. I mean, I rarely use white, but sometimes you need it. The white that you get in the actual kits, the palettes, the water is absolutely pointless. It's Chinese white, called Chinese white, and it's just not worth it at all. Really not worth it. I've noticed there's some little sort of bits between. So that. Some of those are a bit grey, but again, once we get the white in, so it's starting to come together, starting to look quite fun. Like that. Like that. Then notice that the hair roots come into another stripe, which can come down there like that, right down to the eye. And I missed that one actually. I'm putting that in like that. Okay, so it's starting to look quite good. I'm quite enjoying this. And again, you can go back over and darken some stripes, make some a bit more prominent. And we're going to go to the snout, or whatever the exact expression is, but terminology. But I've noticed what they've done is they've splattered some white on it to keep it fairly abstract. So I think I'll do that as well. Like that. And then inside the nostril, it's a sort of grey. That's just a bit less white, black on the. Okay, what else do we need? I think we need a little stripe under here, which I'm missing. Okay, maybe a bit more in the ear, a bit darker on one side, like that, a bit more irregular, and then carry that through and carry it up a bit higher. Same on that side. Maybe make some of those little peaky bits at the top of the ear. Yeah. Beginning to get there. I feel like I need some white soon for the eyes and the eyelashes and the spattering on the snout. So I'm just going to use some white acrylic paint. You can use gouache as well, actually, would be quite good for this. So gouache has more opacity than the watercolour. So gouache is a bit like a combination of acrylic and watercolour together. And that's quite nice to work with. So while that's drying, I'm going to get my white sorted. And sometimes I haven't got enough room in my palette. I'll use an old scrap of paper. So I'm just putting the white on there. I don't need very much. About a quarter of a teaspoon, really. Make sure my water's clean. And then I'm going to go in with my white. Make sure the brush is nice and pointed. I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some little lashes into here. And on that side. And then a few little dotty bits, which I've noticed they've put down here and around the nostril here. Just some sort of generic dotty bits. Then I'm going to go back up to the ears and I'm going to give some speckles on those. And then I'm going to go up to the other side, do some speckles. It sort of breaks up the outside of the ear a little bit. Then I'm going to go up to the mane. So you add the white in, and wherever you, the little strokes of white on the mane, and wherever you add them in, it's obviously going to make what's underneath grey because you're adding white on top of the bluey black. So you're going to get a grey, so you'll get a sense of the grey, the greyer strands of hair in here. Starts to give it more of a sense of the grey. And just use white wherever you want to. You can always add some white into, give sort of patches of white if you like. I might use the white to go over the grey pencil a bit there. I might use the white in the eye, just a little bit. Like that. Right, I'm using the white as well to just lighten some of the areas. I mean, obviously you could do this beforehand with masking fluid, but because I was sort of being quite sort of spontaneous with the with the, it's a bit too thick, with the dripping and the tipping of the paper, I'm now just, I sort of covered quite a lot of it, but now I'm just putting some of it back. But equally, you could do resist with wax or resist with um, masking fluid. I'm just adding little patches of white here and there. I'm going back in here, like that. The nostrils, a few more lashes in, like that. And then afterwards, I might go in with a either a pen or a colouring pencil or something like that, just to sharpen some areas up. Okay, now I'm going to tackle the background. So I'm not just going to leave it like that. I'm going to go back to my bigger brush and I'm going to just use a clean damp brush and I'm going to shift some of the colour I've put down because I can use that and just fill in some of those blank spaces. If you haven't got enough colour, you could just lay some extra colour down. I'm going to go more yellow than anything else. Because although I didn't like the yellow so much in the original painting that I'm working from, I quite like the idea of a bit of yellow around it. So I'm going in with a bit of that cadmium yellow and just giving it a little bit of support around the silhouette of the zebra, because it always helps to have a bit of support around the edge. And you can go stronger in some places and then blend it out to the more vague surrounding, like that. And what it does is it sort of gives your picture a little bit more of a pop, makes it pop a little bit. Okay. And if you don't like it being too strong, you can just lift up a little bit with a clean damp brush after. So you've got a choice. You've got a choice of getting a clean damp brush and just shifting the colour around that you've already got that's there, like this. You can move this around. You see, look, the orange is coming off that patch. Or you can go in and use a bit more of a solid colour and shift that around instead. Suddenly thought the ear was part of the background then, but it's not. So I'm going to get a clean damp brush now and then blend it in. So I don't want it too strong. I want it to sort of blend into the background a bit with a clean damp brush. Okay, so that's already beginning to be a bit stronger now. I've got that yellow put in. And then the same for the background here. Put some yellow in, and I can put some yellow between the hair as well. See, look, that orange there moved nicely. You can see there, that orange has shifted nicely. I can use that. Some colours dry, or stain rather, quicker than others. So some of those other colours I can't lift so much, but the orange seems to be quite keen to shift. So I can use that and blend it in a bit like that. So we're still keeping that sort of slightly erratic feel behind, but we're also giving the zebra a bit more of a surround of colour to support it. And you could equally use orange, or you could use, whatever colour you want, really, out of the colours that you've got in the background. Right, I've spotted something that I want to change, which is this bit of yellow here. So I'm going to lift that off a bit. Because I've got yellow around the zebra, that yellow is a bit too strong inside. So I'm going to use a bit of white on there to slightly push back that yellow. I can't really shift it. That's better. Right, once it's dry, I'm going to go back in with a very I think a black colouring pencil actually would be good, or even I could use a normal graphite pencil. Now I'm actually going to go in with a biro. Ooh, I hear you say. Well, that's fine. You'll be all right. It will give you that real richness of. I mean, although we haven't used black fully, we've used it with blue. This time we can actually go back in and give your biro a bit of a test first, and just pick out some of the areas of the stripes. I'm sort of going along the edge of it a bit more, but you can use it for things like the eye, make the eye pop a little bit more, give it a bit more strength, like that. And you can see that. And then you can use the black for inside there. We can go back in and get some of the lines of the nose, and some of the mouth bit in there, get some sort of extra furry bits inside the ears and the outside. It just gives it a little bit of embellishment without being too strong. Just little bits here and there. You don't want to overdo it. Little stitches of darkness around, and it will just give it a little bit more strength. And you can also use it to sharpen up your lines a bit if you want. If you feel like they've got a bit too scruffy, you can use it to sharpen up some edges. A bit of definition to the snout. I'm also going to go back in and use it for some hairs. Because it's thinner than the paintbrush, it's quite nice. So you can add in some extra hairs in there. You can see that that works quite nicely. Just adding in some finer, stronger hairs in. Ah, okay, I'm going to turn the page around. Don't forget you can keep turning your page around. You don't have to always work in the same direction. Now, the biro is going to look better where there's already some darkness. Otherwise, if you put it on it where it's too light, it will stand out too much. And as I said, if you want to, you can go back in and add some extra bluey black where you think it might need it. I mean, down here, for example, you could. Biros are really useful for watercolour. I don't think many people use them. Great for eyelashes, so much better. Embellishing around the ear a little bit. Okay, it's looking much better now. Much better. I have to hold it up for myself and have a look. Quite liking that actually, it's rather lovely. So pretty much there now. So if you wanted to, there are several things you could do differently. You don't have to have this splishy splotchy background. You could choose a flat background. You don't have to splish and splash colours onto the hide. You could leave it purely black and white. You could mask out the little highlights in the eye with masking fluid or wax. And the same for the snout. You don't have to add white acrylic. You can use more of a sort of beigey grey wash on some of the body, which would be yellow ochre plus a bit of grey, and just do it much lighter than I did it. You could not use the biro and use a colouring pencil. You could use less blue in the black stripes. You could not put colour in the stripes. I mean, there are all sorts of things you could do alternatively, but this is just a simple, fun way of doing the zebra and making it a little bit more interesting for yourself as you're painting. Anyway, there you go, a zebra with colour.